It was late September last year, and business had slowed down for me. I've driven cabs around Jersey City for almost 5 years now, mostly picking up late-night airport rides or weekend bar hoppers downtown. I usually stick to Uber and Lyft since it's safer, but every once in a while I still take direct calls from a few regulars who prefer paying cash one night around 11 p. Me got a call from a number I didn't recognize. The guy introduced himself as a friend of one of my regulars. Carlos asked if I could pick him up a tan apartment building on the Boulevard. Cash only, no apps involved normally. I wouldn't take unknown callers, but he mentioned Carlos and sounded legit enough, besides rent was due soon. So I said yes. She gave me the address, an older building I vaguely knew near Journal Square. As I pulled up to the curb, I texted him. He immediately replied instructing me to drive around to the back alley entrances, saying he had something heavy to load. The alley was narrow, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. Above a rusted metal door, it parked and kept the engine running through the shadows. The guy stepped out. He was average height, dressed casually in a black jacket, jeans, and a baseball pulled down low. He motioned for me to roll down the window. I died and he leaned in, speaking quietly. "Hey man, could you give me hand real quick? I need to get a bag from the basement. It's a bit heavy." Now right away something felt off. We've been asked to help load suitcases or groceries before, but going down into a basement was weird. Still part of my thought maybe had just genuinely needed help. Reluctantly, I shut the engine off, stepped out, and followed him to the door. He unlocked it with the key and pushed it open. Inside was a narrow hallway, demand smelling of damp like mildew. We flipped on a switch, and a single bulb lit up the staircase leading down. Hesitated again, but he moved quickly, already halfway down the stairs. Surging me to follow. The deeper we went, the colder and more uneasy it felt. At the bottom was another door he opened, it revealing a dark basement with concrete floors and pipes running across the ceiling. It looked abandoned and dirty, cluttered with junk. On a table under another dim lamp was a large black duffel bag. Then from across the room, I could tell it was bulky. Without saying much, he grabbed one handle and gestured for me to take the other. As I reached out, I noticed something alarming, a dark red stain seeping from the bottom corner of the bag. My stomach tightened. I hesitated, pulling my hand back quickly. I asked, trying to keep calm, "Hey, what's inside that bag?" He stared at me silently, expression blank for a moment, then quietly said, "Sorry, I can't tell you." My gut told me everything was wrong here. The weight, the stain, it looked like blood. Suddenly the bag looked big enough to hold a person. My head spun with panic. I stepped back instinctively, heart thumping. "I'm not touching that. Sorry, man." "This is too weird," I said. He seemed startled by my reaction, quickly saying, "Wait, I'll double your fee. Just help me load it and drive." The fact that he suddenly offered more money only made me more certain that something was terribly wrong. I shook my head and turned to go upstairs, mumbling an excuse about needing to leave. I hurried up the stairs without looking back, feeling his eyes burning into me the entire way. As I reached my cab, hands shaking, I jumped in and locked the door. She stood at the basement doorway, staring at me. I quickly reversed out of the alley and back onto the main road. My heart was racing as I drove away. I pulled over a few blocks away under the bright streetlights of a convenience store parking lot, adrenaline pounding, sitting there, hands trembling. I couldn't stop picturing that bag. I knew something was horribly wrong. Finally, it took a deep breath and dialed 911, explaining everything within minutes. Police cars raced by Melite, flashing silently toward the apartment. He waited anxiously, feeling guilty for leaving, but grateful I'd trusted my instincts. About half an hour later, an officer called my phone asking me to return and give a statement. When I arrived, the whole street was cordoned off. Officers swarmed the building, radios crackling with urgent voices. A detective approached me, asked questions about the man, about the bag, the basement, everything. Eventually he explained what they'd found inside the bag was the body of a young woman, the guy's wife. They'd gotten into a violent argument and had struck her in the head with a metal tool from his garage, killing her instantly. He'd planned on burying her somewhere quiet, using me and my taxi to transport her away from the city. My legs went weak hearing this. The detective patted me shoulders there, saying I'd been lucky to trust my gut. Has said it could have ended much worse for me if I'd stayed or asked more questions. Those words stuck with me, playing in my head endlessly as I eventually drove home, hands still shaking on the wheel. Never saw Carlos again. He never called me, and I never found out if he even knew what his friend had planned. Before we into the next story, if you're visiting our channel for the first time, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell icon to stay updated with our upcoming scary stories. A few months ago, I was living on a rhythm so steady it felt mechanical. 5 days a week, the same pattern repeated. To finish the evening shift to the small insurance claims call center on Broad Street powered down my computer and left the building with the spill of other agents. The ride on the RTR took me from Manhattan to Atoria in about 20 minutes. I liked that part of the commute inside the car. I could lean back, close my eyes, and let the carriage rock while I unwound from 8 hours of polite voices and policy numbers by 9:15. I was usually stepping out of the 30th Avenue. To my apartment, I lived on the top floor of a 3-story building with a landlord who kept the hallways smelling of fresh paint. It was a simple, predictable life, and I liked it. Thursday in early March, that rhythm-cracked snow had melted only a week before, and the sidewalks were still lined with gray piles of ice. I clocked out at the usual time, collected my coat, and walked halfway to the subway when I remembered I was out of dish soap and bread. My neighborhood market stayed open late, so I decided to shop after I got back to Queens. It felt harmless, just a minor adjustment to the schedule. The market's on the corner of 31st Street and Newtown Road. The fluorescent lights inside threw a cold glare onto the sidewalk. I pushed through the door, grabbed a hand basket, and walked the familiar Aislish halfway down the canned goods row. I heard someone call my name in that bright room with music playing overhead. It needed a second to place the voice. It was Rachel, a girl I had been close with in high school in Brooklyn. We had drifted apart after graduation. She was holding a bag of rice and smiling like she had been waiting to bump into me. The surprise felt warm, and soon we were catching up in the middle of traffic. After a few minutes, she suggested grabbing a seat. The 24-hour dinner across the avenue. My grocery run could wait. The chance to talk with an old friend seemed rare and worth the detour. The diner's metal sign buzzed above the door. Inside, a lean of empty stools faced the grill, and the only other customers were a couple's herring coffee in the back booth. Rachel and slid into a booth near the window. We ordered fries and milkshakes and talked about ordinary things. Jobs, rent their plant, to start classes at LaGuardia Community College. Time blurred. I glanced at my phone once. It was almost 11. Told myself I would leave after finishing my shake, but the conversation kept looping. Comfortable, rambling, and soon the street lamps outside were shining. Empty sidewalks at midnight. I stood, pulled on my coat, and said I had to be up early. Rachel offered to call a rideshare for him. I declined. My apartment was a straight walk of about 20 minutes. The air outside had that sharp late winter bite, but it was clear and still. I felt awake and safe enough to walk. The first blocks were silent, except for a distant elevated train rumble. Storefront gates were down, graffitis hinting under sodium light. Past the laundromat, then the dark shell of a closed bar halfway along 30th Drive. I became aware of footsteps that did not belong to me. They came in short bursts, then paused. When I paused to glance back and saw a man about half a block behind. He wore a Parker hood up and kept his head low. It might have been a coincidence, but my gut stiffened. It turned onto a residential side street lined with identical brick houses. The man turned too. Lengthened my stride. The rubber soles of my sneakers squeaked on damp concrete. 3 houses ahead, a motion sensor activated, spilling porch light across the sidewalk. I felt the urge to run, but worried that breaking into a sprint would or a cynical pretense of coincidence. Instead, I ducked onto the next corner, making a quick left, then an immediate right onto a narrower lane. Me neighborhood is a loose grid, and I knew these back streets well. I should have lost them. Still, the steps reappeared. They were closer now, shorter, almost eager. Panic is loud inside the head. It floods the ears and makes every passing shadow look alive. I remembered advice I had given callers at the office. Stay calm, gather details, seek help. 2 blocks ahead, a yellow taxi idled outside an apartment building. The driver was leaning against the door, scrolling through his phone. When I reached him, I waved and asked if he was on duty. He nodded. I told him I crossed street. She popped the trunk for my small shopping bag, though I kept the bag my lap. As soon as I closed the door, had pulled away from the curb. Relief washed through me enough that my fingers trembled when I tried to text Rachel that I was almost home. She replied with a hum soup emoji. The cab turned left at the next light. I blinked. Left was wrong to reach my block. The driver should have stayed straight for at least 3 more intersections. I leaned forward and told him gently that I had missed the turn. He said something about a shortcut because construction was blocking the usual route. His voice was flat without accent, too controlled. My stomach hollowed. We crossed under the elevated tracks and stopped beside a dim stretch of curb. Streetlights were busted on that block. My phone screen lit the back seat. I pulled up the map, already knowing we had looped back toward the area where the footsteps began. Before I could speak up, the taxi's front passenger door opened. The man in the hood slid inside under the dome light, his always face young, clean. He turned to me and smiled like we were sharing a secret. My first instinct was to latch the door on my side, but the lock switch was already down. The driver raised a hand, palm out, telling me to stay quiet. He merged back onto the street, accelerating fast. The man beside him reached into his pocket and produced a small pistol. It looked older, scratched along the barrel, had twisted in his seat, pointing it low toward my knees. She spoke in a quiet, rehearsed telephone. Money, jewelry. He motioned for me to place everything in my grocery bag. My voice stuck in my throat, dug out my wallet, phone, and a necklace my sister had given me for my last birthday. He told me to keep my eyes down. The car turned again, faster still, tire squealing on the corner. My chest felt tight, but it forced myself to breathe evenly. Panic helps noon. The man said they would drop me near the river once they were done. His partner chuckled, depicted the dark paths by the water far from any house. A pictured headlines. The next day, red and blue lights flared across the rear window, washing these seats in sudden color. A police cruiser had appeared behind us, siren off, but flashers spinning for a second. None of us moved. Then the driver cursed under his breath and tapped the brake. The cruiser's loudspeaker ordered him to pull over, his load halfway to the curb. Looked at this partner and then floored the accelerator. The force shoved me back against the seat. The hooded man whipped around, pistol raised, but the lights behind us swerved with every move. I grabbed the door handle, praying the child lock was off. It clicked, wind roared. As I pushed the door and threw myself on the asphalt, I hit hard on my side, rolled and scrambled upright, sprinting toward the cruiser, waving both hands. The officer inside jumped out and met me halfway, asking if I was hurt. My voice came out raw as I explained. The other officer took off after the taxi, tire showing. One beside me guided me to the cruiser's front seat, shut the door and called for medics. My palms were scraped, coat sleeve torn, but nothing felt broken under fluorescent light at the precinct. I gave a statement. They logged my belongings as stolen, offered to call a family member, and eventually drove me home at 3 in the morning. 2 days passed. I called out sick from the call center and kept the television off. Every small noise outside made me tense. On Sunday evening, someone buzzed the intercom. It was Detective Reyes, the officer who had taken my statement. He stood in the hall, holding a sealed evidence bag containing my wallet, phone, and necklace. He said the suspects lost control during the chase, clipped a tree on Hoy Avenue, and tried to flee on foot. The passenger had fractured his ankle. Both were now in custody, facing armed robbery and kidnapping charges. He thanked the detective and signed their seat. For Masha turned to leave. He paused, told me to speak. The only reason the patrol unit noticed them, they were clocked at 42 in a 25 zone. A simple traffic stop had broken the plan wide open after he left. I placed the necklace back around my neck. It felt the heavier than before, like every link carried the weight of that night. I still walk home from work, but I vary my route in a longer wave. Offers for a ride when friends ask. The city is the same, but the edges are sharper on some evenings. When a car lays too long at the curb, memory rises clear as glass of a hooded figure stepping into him and closing the door. He ways. Thought summer would lift my luck, but June of last year proved me wrong. I had been job hunting since the spring, sending CV after CV, sitting in reception areas that smelled of air freshener and stale coffee, only to be told someone else had a better fit. By the time the days grew long and hot, my savings were gone. My parents, both in their 70s, depended on me for rent and medication at night. I lay awake sweating in my coins in my purse and listening to the hum of the floor fan. I finally told my friend Kira what was happening. We met in Ye Park by the canal near Limehouse. The sun was bright enough to sting my eyes, and the benches were hot to the touch. Kira listened, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek, and handed me the keys to her silver Toyota. Use the car, she said. Sign up as a ride hail driver, only for a while. Nights are busy and tips are better. I hesitated. I'd never driven for strangers, but my pockets were empty, and the rent notice on the fridge felt like it grew bigger each day. As I ended up that evening, they approved me in 3 days after a background check and a quick photo of my license. I vacuumed the car, filled the tank with the last of my cash, and placed a little bottle of hand sanitizer in the cup holder. To look professional, my first shift began on a Friday just after sundown, when the sky was still pink over the city. Heat lingered on the pavement, rising in soft waves that blurred headlights. He wore a light cotton blouse and tied my hair up to keep it off my neck. Toyota's air conditioning fought against the warmth, but never quite want. The first rides were simple. A pair of toured into a riverside hostel. 2 friends from Brixton are going to a club in Soho, laughing about ex-boyfriends and sharing a bottle of water. A chef, whose uniform smelled of grilled onions, riding from King's Cross to his flat in Hackney. HB on the phone brought relief for here 9 bound there. Small pieces of security near midnight. The app pinged again. Pickup Royal London Hospital. Whitechapel destination Wilson Green. Extra distance meant extra pay, so I accepted. I took a swallow from my water bottle and turned onto the wide road, lined with late-night kebab shops and old brick buildings glowing under streetlights. The hospital entrance was busy. Even at this hour, a few nurses in pastel scrubs stood outside. Jokes, two ambulances waited with engines sidling. My passenger stepped through the glass doors. Atal Manning Ray jogging bottom should, up despite the heat, surgical mask covering half his face. He carried a white pharmacy bag swinging from his wrist without a word. He opened the back door and slid in and greeted him, asked if he was comfortable. He nodded, but kept his eyes on the window. The map showed 45 minutes across the city. I merged into traffic windows. Up Air Kananlo, we drove in silence through Algate and onto Commercial Street, where soft neon spilled from. Late bar Satarid light. He leaned forward. His voice was dry, almost tired. Can you turn left up ahead? Don't fancy the main road, too many cameras. Their quest nudged something uneasy in my gut. The direct route was faster, and every driver knew it. Still, customers could choose in Audit and took the left, guiding us onto a quieter street, where old warehouses turned their backs to the road. 3 blocks later, he spoke again. Cancelin was flat, no anger, just instructions. Sorry, it tried to keep my voice steady. End the trip on the phone. His breath brushed the back of my knee. Through the gap between the seats, Sif felt a warm metal touch on my shoulder. A glance down, the faint reflection of a knife blade. My thumb trembled as I opened the appraisal tap pan. The screen went blank. The company would no longer follow our locations. Wet collected at my hairline. Now pass methaphone, he said. I reached back without turning. Handing it over, he placed it in his pocket. Street lights flickered past, pooling light onto the dashboard. The aircon suddenly felt cold against my damp skin. He shifted closer, his knee pressing the seat. Open the glove box, he said. I found the cheap backup phone and a folded 10-pound note for emergencies. He took both. Pull over there, he said, pointing to a narrow alley that smelled of warm rubbish and spilled beer. Shattered glass glittered under the headlights. West stopped engine, idling fan blowing warm air again. He leaned forward, bringing the knife closer. And unlock your banking app. My fingers shook. Wrong breaths. Loud second try success. The balances showed 2B63 snow pending deposits. New overdraft. Almost nothing. Has starred for a long moment. The alley buzzed with an unseen insect clicking against the windshield. Finally he exhaled a short breath. That could have been a laugh. Driving all night for 2 quiddy. You've been looking after my parents, I said. My throat felt dry as gravel. He leaned back, the knife lowering until its tip rested near his knee for a heartbeat. We sat in thick silence as somewhere down the alley. A bottle clattered, rolling on concrete. Here reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a folded green note. Us currency, $100. He tossed it onto the passenger seat. Take it, he said. Fill the tank, feed your folks, and wait 5 minutes after I'm gone before you move. I didn't touch the note at first. My eyes flicked from the money to the knife. He caught the look, slid the blade inside his sleeve, and opened the door. Warm night air rushed in, carrying the smell of frying onions from a distant takeaway. He stepped out, closed the door gently, and walked toward the mouth of the alley. I locked the door, hands vibrating on the steering wheel. The dashboard clock ticked. It counted inhalations 1, 2, 3 until 300 seconds crawled past. Then it shifted into gear and rolled slowly back to the main road, headlights dancing over damp brick on my way to Limehouse. Stopped at an all-night petrol station. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. His lid the fresh 100 bill across to the cashier, who inspected it, shrugged, and handed McCangen pounds. Filled the tank until the nozzle clicked, feeling every liter atop and hunts. When I reached Kira's flat, the first birds were chirping, and the sky over the canal was turning soft gray blue. The summer air already felt warm inside. I left the change on her coffee table and curled up on the sofa, shoes still on, listening to my pulses low. I told my parents nothing. The next morning, it just made them tease mild and paid the rent in cash. That afternoon, the rest went to their prescriptions and groceries. I kept driving, but only on busy main roads, refusing pickups that looked odd. My life is still a string of airs and long nights. But sometimes, as the sun rises over the city, I feel the weight of